morning, good evening. Welcome to Capital Convos, where we have conversations about the 2024 legislative session, things that are moving through the legislature, bills, and all those wonderful things in between. I am Representative Rep Matsumoto, and I have the wonderful honor of representing Mililani and Mililani Mauka, where I was born and raised. And today we have a really wonderful show for you. I am going to be joined by several members of our House Minority Research staff. And so they are the wonderful staff that go through and they draft legislation for us and resolutions, as well as they go and they research and they do analysis on all of the bills moving through the legislature. And this is something that's really, really crucial because we usually have about 4,000 to 6,000 bills introduced every single year. And so that's a lot of things to go through. And so they sit on the various committees, whether that be agriculture, transportation, housing, finance, and they analyze the bills. So when the legislators go down to the floor, we have a good idea of really what went in to those bills, the pros, the cons, what testimony was there, and able to have that dialogue so we make really, really informed decisions on how to vote. And so they're going to be coming on the show today to really educate us on some of the bills that are moving through, the good bills, the bad bills, their favorite bills. And so super excited to share that with you. Before we get started talking to all of the wonderful analysts with our House Minority Research, I want to let everybody know if you are free this Friday, April 12th, come out to Mililani District Park starting at 6 o'clock. We are going to have our legislative town hall. It doesn't matter if you live in Mililani or not. Please come out. We're going to be covering the bills that are moving through this legislative session. I want to be able to hear from you. So again, join us on Friday, April 12th from 6 to 8 at Mililani District Park. For more information, go to repmatsumoto.com, or you can also see our Instagram and Facebook page at Rep Matsumoto. So now we're going to hear from Racine. So Racine, so happy to have you here and a part of our staff. So tell me what you do and your journey to get here.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm from Pearl City, Palisades, proud to be. I am born and raised here on Oahu, graduated from Iolani, went on to the University of Hawaii. My undergraduate was in pre-med, and then my master's was in education. And actually, one of the first jobs that I got right after college was here at the Capitol. So fast forward some years, I went on to finish my education, started a family. And I really believe that it's no coincidence that I'm back here at the Capitol. Honestly, I feel like I have the honor to be able to provide support to the House Minority Caucus as a legislative analyst and be able to support you, Rep Matsumoto, as well. I know that we have a great longstanding history, and I get to call you Rep Matsumoto, which I'm so proud of. But I'm actually very, very proud that I'm a mom of 4, as well as a married mom. Mm-hmm. So it's been great starting a family and coming back here and being able to support the House Minority Caucus in this capacity.
And for those who are listening and don't know, Racine and I go way back because when she was playing volleyball for the University of Hawaii, I was playing water polo. And then we competed for Miss Hawaii together.
That's right.
For a few years. And so I've been wanting you to work here for a very, very long time. So I'm super excited that we get to have you for the analyst. And it's been very clear this session as we've gone through the bills that just your ability to look in, to have that bigger picture is really there. So in your time here as an analyst, what are some of the bills? What is the landscape looking like?
Yeah, it's so interesting to see how the wheels turn here at the Capitol, and then recognizing that policy, laws, these bills actually influence almost everything that we experience on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
That being said, the bills, the landscape of the bills, they're very broad, all-encompassing. But what I'm really proud of actually is the House Minority Caucus was able to address some of the specific issues that the state is facing right now: homelessness, affordable housing, cost of living, education, and of course the Lahaina fires, crime. All of these different issues were introduced in various bills by the caucus. So we were able to track some of those bills. Some of them are still alive, and we're excited about that.
Yes.
Some bills that came out of the majority side, many social issues, a lot of, kind of triggering bills, but very, again, like I said, broad. I feel like any possible idea, any concept has been introduced in some form or fashion in the language of the bills this session.
Yeah, and it's been really encouraging, just with the help of HMIR and you and everybody, we've had 3 of the bills that I introduced crossover, pass through the House, cross over to the Senate, got heard in the Senate. And so our individual housing account program bill, the Hula May bill, as well as a bill for sex trafficking,
That's right.
Things that are really, really important. And so
Absolutely.
we're making a lot of headway. But again, what are some of the bills that really stand out to you?
Well, I'm actually responsible for tracking 4 committees. I have education, higher ed, and technology. I have health and homelessness, as well as human services. So I can definitely speak to the bills that have come through those committees. Having worked as an educator in the private sector, I definitely understand the necessity of pouring resources, funding into the Department of Education. 2 bills in particular that I've had my eye on was HB 1775, as well as SB 2256. And these 2 bills, unfortunately, they died in the House, expanded free breakfast and lunch to all students within the DOE. I understand how the cost of living really places burdens on families to meet basic needs, right? And to have the security of 2 meals for a student, it makes a huge difference and it's a huge relief. So I really resonated with the bill. I hope to see, something introduced similarly probably next session. Additionally, as a working mom, right, I understand, oh my gosh, we need to find childcare that is quality and affordable, right?
Absolutely.
So there was one bill in particular, SB 3116, that expanded early learning and early access to those early education programs under the Department of Human Services with the Preschool Open Doors program for those families that qualified. So just kind of expanding that access, I thought was a huge, huge help, as a mom. And I'm sure a lot of other families could probably agree.
Absolutely. Commenting on the free lunch and the free breakfast bill, my father was a teacher at Nanakuli High School and intermediate school for over 30 years. Wow. And the pilot program, Nanakuli was one of the schools. Wow. And got to hear from my dad how it really made a difference. He'd always have cup noodle in his room because he went, my kids they're hungry. Yeah. So he wanted to provide that for them. So having that pilot program at his school, I was able to see firsthand how that made a huge difference. And just like you, I'm a mom of young children, and preschool is crazy. Yes. The cost of preschool is insane. It's more than a mortgage for a lot of times. So paying for 2 of my kids to be in preschool was almost $40,000 a year for my husband and I. And, we're not unique. And even the supply, you'd have to be on a wait list for so long. So really focusing on that early childhood education is so, so important.
Yes. And to go back to your dad being an educator, I mean, overall, it just yields better outcomes, student performance, student achievement, to have them fed, to have them taken care of. And just like that added comfort as a parent to know, like, okay, I'm getting some support. Right. So I totally agree with those pieces. It's really important to focus on education, especially this session.
Yeah. And it's encouraging to me because I've been in the legislature now for 12 years. And especially when I had my son Noah, 7 years ago, nobody was really talking about early childhood education. It wasn't top of the list. I've been part of the Women's Legislative Caucus for years, and we address a lot of important issues. But early education wasn't one of them until recent years. And I think sometimes that's the makeup of the legislature. Many people had their children grown, or they weren't really thinking about early education. And that has really shifted in the last few years. And it's a huge need because we talk about cost of living all the time. And for young families, childcare is often
imperative.
Yeah. And it's often more than their housing. And that's crazy looking at the cost of living and the cost of housing or rent in Hawaii, that sometimes that your childcare is even more than that.
Yeah. I'm glad that, like you said, there's a lot of different bills that are there to support families in that specific situation. Additionally, I wanted to talk about another bill. Actually, we're talking about specific aspects of education, early childhood. And now there's a bill called HB 2074. And I had mentioned, I'm not sure if I mentioned, but 2 of my children are actually DOE students, and they go to Kaiapuni, which is Hawaiian immersion schools that are exclusively taught in the Hawaiian language medium. So I'm excited about this bill that actually just passed out of Ways and Means, in fact, that is going to provide some really really necessary funding to the Office of Hawaiian Education and some positions at both the state and the school level. So it's definitely a win for the Lahui and allowing them to flourish and gaining that extra access to Hawaiian language.
And again, something that wasn't talked about enough in years past and is really gaining momentum. And so that's something that's been encouraging to see over the years. So one of the other things in regards to education that the Republican caucus really pushed was for elected school boards. Yeah. And so we were seeing just on the floor today, they were talking about the superintendent's salary. And somebody brought up that we have a board of education that is appointed, not elected. And our caucus put in a bill for elected school boards. And we are the only state in the nation that does not have elected school boards. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we're seeing it all come to fruition now, the necessity to have people have a say, right, in those important positions in the board, which affects something like determining the salary for the superintendent. Of course, now being appointed by the governor, the BOE does have, there is an opportunity for the public to contribute, but in a minimal capacity in comparison to elected school boards like the caucus proposes, where, these representatives are essentially coming from districts, they're educators, they're all sorts of just an amalgamation of different type of representation that is more diverse, that I think is more accurate, more on tune with what's happening in communities. And there's so many different demographics in our state alone, right? And elected school boards, I think, would really provide some accurate representation there.
Yeah. And I think we did a really good job in crafting this bill because sometimes there's way too many school boards, right? They're too small, there's too many, versus we only have one statewide board of education. Like we're talking about, the communities know better, right? A school in Molokai has very different needs than a school in Mililani.
And downtown Honolulu. Yes. Stark contrast.
Absolutely. And so I think that's something that we really wanted to push. So we didn't do way too many school boards. We just did a school board per county. Right? Let's start there. And unfortunately, that bill didn't even receive a hearing. I think there would have been a lot of support for something like that because it does matter. That community input matters. And especially when you have an appointed board of education, most people don't even know who is on their board of education, right? Versus if you bring it down to a smaller level, you have a little more access. Talk about that grassroots makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Who knows better than the community themselves, right?
Absolutely.
I agree.
Now, this is your first session as an analyst. Give me some of your takeaways or some of the things like the process that you think people should know about.
Oh, goodness. Well, it's definitely, it's removed a lot of veils, I think. There's been a separation of, I think, people in the community, your average citizen, and what really happens in the legislative process. That disconnect, I think, is very huge and it needs to be bridged. Having an opportunity to serve in this capacity has really awakened my desire for civic engagement. I think not just myself as an individual citizen, but also to perpetuate that and promote that in the community. So, if there's any opportunity that I can to just kind of PSA a little bit about what the legislative process looks like and how easy and accessible it is for someone in the community to get involved. I am all for it. So I think that's one thing that is one of my hugest takeaways is that the legislative process is in the average citizen's grasp. It's just a matter of one step contacting your legislator, knowing who is representing your community and kind of funneling into the resources that they provide, because most often than not, especially in your district, you have so many accessible resources on how to have, an average citizen get involved in the legislative process, submit testimony, come down for a hearing, and actually see, the progression and the evolution of bills that turn into laws that directly affect them and their families.
Yeah. Absolutely. And speaking of PSA, we both filmed a how to get involved in the legislative process video. And so, if people want to look that up, you can go to repmatsumoto.com.
That's right.
Click on how to get involved. You can go to hawaiihousegop.com. We have the videos there as well. It really is accessible. It's just knowing those steps. And I always tell people, I think they think testimony is a really scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it is. I remember the first time I testified at the Capitol, I mean, I was shaking because I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was going to be this huge, big, scary thing. And it really isn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't have the time to come down to the Capitol, you can still testify via Zoom.
That's right.
And I always tell people you can even just go online and just click support or oppose in
Mm-hmm.
comments and make it very, very simple. But I can't tell you how many
So
times
easy.
I've sat in committee and there's zero testimony on a bill, or there's only one piece of testimony. And I'm sure you know, as a research analyst and also me as a legislator, that makes it difficult sometimes to go
Absolutely.
to gauge where people are at.
Yep.
I mean, any thoughts on that?
Yes, the voice of the community is so vital to the substance of a bill, and to be able to interpret maybe what the long-term implications, short-term, long-term implications of an idea that's introduced, it needs to be heard from the foresight of the community sometimes. So I really appreciate testimony at all levels, from state agencies all the way down to, a citizen, community groups, because you really need to understand the full picture that needs to be painted in order to digest a bill and properly inform the elected officials on what it's all about.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite things this year, we were talking about education and students, is I had a 5th grade student from Mililani Malka Elementary who wrote me a letter because she wanted to make sure we had more native plants planted. So with the whole things with the wildfires, making sure that we are replanting with native plants.
Wow.
And she wrote me a letter. We wrote back and we worked on a resolution together. That resolution got heard, and
Wow.
she testified. I'm getting choked up thinking about it. She testified via Zoom, and that resolution passed through the House.
Wow.
It is now passed. And I mean, that's to me also what it's all about,
Yes.
getting engaged at all levels. And when I talk to students, my favorite thing to ask them, you go, how old do you have to be to register to vote? And that one always tricks them. Is 16, right? How
Mm-hmm.
old do you have to be to vote? 18. And then I ask, how old do you have to be to testify? And I let them guess, and they'll be like 21, 18,
Uh-huh.
I go, lower, 10, lower, 5, lower,
Wow.
1. I go, any age. You can be any age. And I think
true.
that's what's so powerful. And again, I used to sit on the education committee, and I remember clearly 2 4-year-olds came to testify on the importance of early childhood education.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, every single legislator sitting there was paying attention to every word that they had to say. So
Yeah, wow.
being engaged at all levels from 0 to 99 really does make a difference.
Yeah, it sure does.
Thank you so much, Racine, for joining me today and providing your insights and your thoughtful comments on the legislative session.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're listening to Capitol Convos on AM 690 and FM 94.3, where we have conversations about the legislative process. Again, if you're listening, please come out this Friday, April 12th, to our legislative town hall. It's going to be at Mililani District Park from 6 to 8. Please join us so I can hear your feedback and have a wonderful conversation on the bills that are moving through the legislature. Let's continue with our next guest today. We're going to talk with Maya. Maya, thank you so much for joining us today. So if you can tell to everybody listening, what is your role here at the Capitol?
Yeah, so I'm Maya Sweeney, and I'm the legislative attorney with the House Minority Research Office.
Yeah, so Maya does so many great things and helps us to make sure things does the legal checks, make sure things are constitutional. And this year, one of the really big issues that came up in multiple bills was cannabis. And it's been top of mind for a lot of people out there in the community as well. So take us through some of that.
Yeah, so we saw cannabis bills that focused on medical marijuana as well as recreational or illicit use. So some of the medical marijuana bills that we saw one of them allowed medical dispensaries to purchase products from one another. Mm-hmm. There's a House version that ultimately died in finance, but then the Senate version is still going. Another medical version or medical marijuana bill extended the sunset on personal cultivation, so allowing people who do have access to medical marijuana to kind of grow that themselves. And then as far as criminal or illicit use, there are some decriminalization bills that sort of increase the allowable possession amount while decreasing the fine. And then, of course, the big ticket item, adult use recreation, that is being held in finance right now.
Yep. So let's go into the medical a little bit more. So when people have asked us before, why would medical dispensaries need to be able to sell between each other?
So right now they are allowed to under existing law, but it puts a big burden on the Department of Health to sort of allow that, and they have a lot of discretion. So it's really difficult to make those transfers possible. So the bill that I was just mentioning, it would kind of ease up the restrictions. And by doing that, it would allow, so right now the medical dispensaries operate kind of in silos. They have to be good at everything, offer all the products, which makes it really hard to make the prices competitive with the black market. So if they were able to purchase products from other dispensaries, then one dispensary could be really good at producing one product and vice versa. And they can each purchase those products from each other at a lower cost for consumers. And that way they're competing with the black market, which we love to see, right? We want people to be using the legal avenues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's go into the next area when it comes to the decrim. We just heard that on the floor a few days ago, and it was a hot button issue. Again, what was interesting is some of the people who voted no on the legalization had reservations or voted no on the decriminalization. So that was something very interesting. I know you get to sit on the floor with us as our legislative attorney. Take us through a little bit about the decriminalization bill.
Those bills are a hard pill to swallow for sure. And I think the Attorney General's testimony in committee really, it hit it home for sure for me. They explained how if the goal ultimately is legalization, further decriminalization like this, it really makes it hard for that to be effective. Because by decriminalizing possession, especially in amounts that could be street dealer amounts, it's really hard to crack down on enforcement. So you're really allowing the black market to proliferate. And then if eventually 5 years down the road, a year down the road, 10 years down the road, who knows when legalization may or may not happen, it makes it really hard to compete with that black market because it's just been allowed to grow and have their own infrastructure.
Absolutely. And I know one of the speeches on the floor that got me is because we're going, correct me if I'm wrong, from 3 grams to 1 ounce in that bill.
Correct.
And on the floor, one of the legislators made the point that 1 ounce of marijuana is like 100 joints. Why would anybody need 100 of anything unless there's intent to sell? Right. And so that was something that was, really hit home for me. And I think for a lot of people, I think that speech brought a lot of some of those no votes or with reservation votes. And like you said, it's really interesting that we're having a decriminalization bill that essentially is legalizing it without any of those safeguards put into place. And so going in now to that legalization bill, so SB 3335 got a lot of attention in the news and social media, also on the floor. It was one of the most hotly debated items, and it got, I believe, 23 no votes, which, I've been in office for 12 years. I have only seen one bill ever die on the floor, and very, very rarely do we ever get to 23 no votes. And I think that's important to note because a lot of times I think people probably think we have a lot of close votes. And I know, as you've probably seen, there's very few votes that ever get more than 5 to 7 no votes on the floor. And so this one was really hotly debated. So tell me about some of the reasons that people were in opposition of this bill.
Yeah. I mean, like you noted, people stood up on the floor for a variety of reasons. They all had a different reason that they were in opposition to this bill. But some of the most convincing arguments that I heard was, first of all, the price tag. That's a lot to pay, especially in a year where Maui really should be the fiscal responsibility and the priority here. And just by taking attention away from them, I think maybe some of them might feel invalidated. I don't know. But so really now is just not the time in terms of just the cost of that bill. Also, I think a lot of people have the impression that it's going to be a huge moneymaker, but the way that the bill is structured, the tax revenue is funding a lot of the programs that need to happen in order to prevent the negative impacts of legalization. So all of that money is going right into something else. And that way it undercuts a primary incentive of legalization. I mean, obviously, those programs are developed in order to kind of learn from the mistakes that other states have made. So in that way, it's a good thing, but it really undercuts like a major reason to legalize in the first place. Another argument, obviously Hawaii has these food sustainability goals. We'd like to be able to produce enough food because right now I think you often say we only have 2 weeks worth of supplies. If anything were to happen, that we're like completely isolated. And in this way, if hemp or cannabis became a really cash crop for these rural districts, then it might be hard to put that priority and the focus back on produce. Another thing is just the enforcement mechanism. We're already in a law enforcement shortage. There's lots of vacancies in that department. And this bill would require more hiring to just kind of make sure that people are using the legal avenues that they're creating. And even with that, it's not as easy to enforce as, say, like DUIs with alcohol, because you can't blow into a breathalyzer and prove whether you're under the influence of marijuana. So there's a lot of just kinks that need to be worked out. And the longer that we allow other states to sort of figure that out before us, we can learn from their mistakes if eventually this does become legalized. And that's become part of the conversation as well. Like people have said the FDA has made moves to deschedule marijuana as a controlled substance. And I don't think that's a very convincing argument personally, because if that's going to happen, why do we need to preempt the federal action? Why don't we wait? They can pave the road for all of the issues that people have brought up in testimony, like firearms and banking and things that right now, the states that have legalized it, their regulations aren't in line with federal regulations in that regard. And they're kind of running into roadblocks with that. So I say if they're going to deschedule it, let the federal government pave the way and then we can follow suit.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point about the money. Because a lot of times I hear for people who are for it when I'm out in the community and they say, I'm for this because we can tax it. We can tax it a whole lot. But like you brought up, if we tax it a whole lot, that just incentivizes people towards a black market. You know, why you can't compete if you're putting such heavy taxes on it. And I also laugh because I look at the macro picture for a lot of bills, and we are looking for flavored tobacco to ban it for vaping because it is an incentive for kids to use it. And this has become a big issue. We had a big rally at the Capitol. They do that every year. But in the same token, at the same time, we're trying to legalize marijuana and thinking that's not also going to become a much bigger issue for kids at school. And so we do this with a lot of things, whether it's housing or some of our tax structure, where we're trying to pass two bills at the same time that almost contradicts each other if you look at it from a logical perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so some of the big things, as we saw on the floor too, is people were bringing up their surveys that they had in their district. And I send a survey out to my district every single year with a lot of the controversial bills. And when we asked our district of District 38, do you think that we should legalize recreational cannabis? 68% of the district said no. So that was really, really interesting to have that come back, because it really just shows where the district stands. There was only a very small percentage in support. Many were undecided. And I think it's because people are looking at, is it really worth the risk? And so that's something that I think was a big issue this year. And thank you so much for doing such a good job of covering it as our legislative attorney and giving us all the background information, because I know it's been in the news a lot and a lot of people have wondered about those bills and really the background behind them.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it today.
You're listening to Capitol Convos on AM 690 and FM 94.3, where we have conversations about the legislative process. Please come out this Friday, April 12th, to our legislative town hall. It's going to be at Mililani District Park from 6 to 8. Please join us so I can hear your feedback and have a wonderful conversation on the bills that are moving through the legislature. Now we're going to have a conversation with Sophia. Thank you, Sophia, for joining us here on Capitol Convos. You know, let's start off. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your background.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. My name's Sophia, and I'm from California, Southern California to be specific. I went to UC San Diego for my undergrad and HPU for my master's. I've played soccer my whole life, and now I'm working here at the Capitol.
Nice. I wish I played soccer my whole life. I now coach both of my kids' soccer teams, but I realized at the 4-year-old and 6-year-old level, you just have to be super enthusiastic.
Yes.
But maybe you can come out and help coach them as well.
Anytime. Just let me know. Time and place.
But it's been great to have you working here at the Capitol as one of our legislative analysts. And I want to launch straight into the bills. What do you think is one of the best bills that you've seen this year? One of your favorites?
Yeah. So I think my favorite bill from this session is HB 2652. It's relating to the estate tax. And to those people who don't know what that is, essentially when a family business owner passes away and wants to pass the business on to someone in the family, there is a massive state estate tax of 20% of the price of the business has to be paid to the government in order to pass that on, alongside a 40% federal tax. So essentially, if you die and you want to pass your business on, you're paying 60% tax to do that. What that does is it often forces family businesses to just sell their business instead because they can't afford to keep it. But what this bill would do would be essentially eliminate that estate tax for immediate family members. Spouses is already there, and then children, grandchildren, stepchildren, etc. So that bill's in the House right now, or sorry, in the Senate right now. Hopefully it goes through, but I think that's a really good bill to help keep family businesses in business.
And again, I think that's, like you mentioned, the family business portion is so essential, especially here in Hawaii. We always talk about supporting our small businesses, supporting our family-run businesses, and we've just seen in just the last few months, left and right, all these small family businesses are going out. I had mentioned earlier my family farm and how difficult it was to run that farm. We just unfortunately closed after 114 years.
Wow, yeah.
And it's all of these different things that usually make it more difficult for business. It's great to have something that actually helps for once. But again, in the last few weeks, I've just seen all of these small mom and pop places in the news saying we're closing. And they cite the difficulty to do business here in Hawaii.
Yeah, I think I saw in the committee hearing about this bill, this actually almost happened to Zippy's about 20 years ago. Luckily, they found a way to keep it in the family, but they almost had to sell to a third party from mainland. And I just think that, like we always say, keeping local businesses local, family businesses family, they have to compete with public businesses that have stocks. So these public businesses don't need to worry about this estate tax, where family local businesses, it's like it could be do or die for them. So I really liked this bill, and I really hope it passes through the Senate.
Yes, we're going to be watching it as it goes through. So you mentioned your favorite bill. What is a bill that you think was maybe not your favorite, or something that is a bad bill that was introduced this year?
So I'm interested to talk to you about this one because I'm not sure how you think about it.
Okay.
But personally, HB 2720 was my least favorite bill. This one established a collective bargaining unit for grad students. And it's in the Senate right now. It's doing really well. I think it's going to pass. I'm against it because grad students at UH, grad assistants, they get free tuition, they get paid, they get sick leave, and they get a health benefits plan. Giving them their own collective bargaining unit allows them to request more. And my question is, who is paying for the more? Is it the students? Is it the taxpayer? Is it the government? Is it the school? And when I called UH, I called Department of Budget and Finance, I called everyone in between, nobody could give me an answer on who's paying for that. So I felt there was a lack of transparency there. I felt that they're already getting free tuition, and I don't know what more they could want. They're also getting paid. So I just don't like that bill.
What was the testimony when you would see that in committee? What was the split, the for and against?
So there was overwhelming support. One, which was UH, they had comments and they were deliberately not taking a position. But the overwhelming support was probably about 2.5 hours of students, grad students. They came with their t-shirts on with the logo of the USSR fist on their t-shirts, trying to collectively bargain and unionize and that kind of thing. So everybody was in support, but they were all the grad students. So there was no really public input on what they think.
And so this is interesting because this is a bill. I've been in the legislature now for 12 years, and I've probably seen this bill for at least the last 10 years, right? So it's interesting that every single year this bill comes up. And as we head into conference, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see what happens as we go through. The legislature is very different this year. 50% of our legislature, more than 50%, is in their first or second term. We have a very new legislature. And so as we go through, it's going to be, we'll see what happens, especially as we head into conference, whether this is something that passes this year or not.
Yeah, I'm excited to see.
I'm also interested to ask you, what are some of your takeaways from the legislature? What are some of the things that you've learned? What have you experienced?
Yeah, I think overall what I can take away, what I've learned from this session about the Hawaii state government is while many of the legislators are very well-intentioned, I feel that all of them have a strong urge for more government involvement in every area of the lives of the people in Hawaii. And like I said, even if it's well-intentioned, that urge is in them to just involve themselves more and more and more. Personally, my own values, I favor less government. I favor drawing back on how much we involve ourselves. But that's not really the, I guess you could say, vibes of the Hawaii state legislature at the moment. That's kind of what I've taken away.
Yeah. And I think people are able to see that with our budget. We have a very, very large budget for a state of our size. And that relates very close to taxes, right? People talk about all the time that the cost of living in Hawaii is so high. We have one of the highest income tax rates in the nation.
Yeah.
Right. Being able to take a closer look at what our priorities are, I think is something that's really, really important. And what's difficult from the legislative perspective is you have individuals or different groups lobbying you for bills to be the top priority. And so I've just made it my mission to take a macro perspective and go, what really is the priority? And it's hard to do as a legislator. As a legislator. And I think that's why we end up with, like you talked about, bills that are not necessarily maybe the most important and continuing to build government. But any other takeaways you had?
Just that I've had an amazing experience being able to do this. This job is so awesome. I've loved to get to know you and all the other reps, and being in the building every day. It's definitely a cool experience. So I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I'm hopeful that some of your bills and resos will pass this session.
We've got a few. I think we're going to have 4 of our resolutions pass, and we have
exciting.
One of our bills being heard, a housing bill, because housing is so important. I wish more of them were passing, but again, the fact that we still have things moving through is positive. That doesn't always happen. When you're in the minority, it's very unfortunately unusual to have your bills pass. But again, we couldn't do our jobs without the researchers and the ledge analysts like you. I think people don't realize you guys do a great job drafting bills, you analyze bills. And so again, really appreciate everything that you guys do. And thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
You're listening to Capitol Convos on AM 690 and FM 94.3, where we have conversations about the legislative process. Please come out this Friday, April 12th, to our legislative town hall. It's going to be at Mililani District Park from 6 to 8. Please join us so I can hear your feedback and have a wonderful conversation on the bills that are moving through the legislature. Next, we have Angela. Angela, thank you so much for joining us today. To everybody listening out there, tell them, how did you get involved with working with the House Minority Research Office?
Sure. Actually, this is my second year working for the House Minority. So 2 years ago, 2022, I started working as an analyst for the House Minority. And during that time, I was attending my first year of law school. And that's the reason why I didn't come back for 2023. So with the experience I learned from working at a private firm, I'm able to help assist a lot of the minority reps now.
And you do such a great job. And
Thank you.
With the research that you guys provide us, I always tell people there's no way that legislators could do our jobs without our amazing research staff, because there's, between 4,000 and 6,000 bills introduced every year. And especially as we're running through all of them, we really need the help of everybody in the research office. And so what committees do you cover and what subjects are you responsible for?
Right. So currently I cover all of the committees that Representative Ward is in.
Okay.
So that would be the Agriculture Committee, Energy and Environmental Protection, as well as arguably the biggest one, Finance.
Yes. So for those who are listening and don't know, almost every single bill goes through the Finance Committee at some point. If they're going to make it through the legislative process. And so the Finance Committee just hears lots and lots of bills. So if you're the researcher for the Finance Committee, that is a big task. And so because you get to see so many of the bills, which bill to you, whether it's dead or alive, has really been the most memorable?
Off the top of my head, I can think of HB 1892.
Okay. What is that?
Sure. That is a bill surrounding cesspools, basically wastewater treatments. And the reason why it's memorable to me is because, well, a little bit of backstory. I knew nothing about cesspools when I first came here.
As most people don't.
Yes. And for anybody listening, cesspools are essentially some type of wastewater treatment. So it's just a hole in the ground about 12 to 20 feet deep. And it's a way to filter sanitary waste naturally. So the intent of the bill is to essentially create a cesspool compliance pilot grant project, and as well as to mandate having a connection to a wastewater system by 2050. So when you first look at the bill, which is why it was memorable to me, is you think, wow, great, let's protect our groundwater. However, when you peel back the curtain, you come to find out that a lot of these wastewater conversions actually cost about $10,000 to around $50,000 for each homeowner or somebody who owns one. So that's definitely one of the bills that I'll be keeping my eye on.
Yeah, and I think that happens so many times is, at a first glance, a bill goes, okay, that makes sense.
Right.
It looks great.
Mhm.
And I think that's what our House Republican caucus does a good job of peeling back those layers and going,
Absolutely.
how does it affect everybody? What is the bigger picture? And so those are things that are really, really important. And I know you sit on the Ag Committee. My family has been in agriculture for 114 years. And there's a lot of really big things like you talked about. My family farm, Peterson Upland Farm, after 114 years, just this year, we ended up saying we had to close because of a lot of the bills that go through the legislature that people don't even realize have impact. And so again, peeling back those layers are so very important.
I absolutely agree. And that's why I feel so fortunate to be able to be on the finance committee because like you said, we hear everything, from cesspools to agriculture to traffic lights, everything. It's honestly been really exciting.
Are there any other bills that stand out to you that you've, as you've seen them go through the process?
Well, based on the committees that I'm on, I would have to say a lot of the focus this year has been on invasive species.
Mm-hmm.
I can't name a bill number off the top of my head, unfortunately.
That's okay. I don't even know my own bill numbers. I always go, it's so difficult. I always have to look it up.
Right.
But anything that, invasive species is a really big issue. We've seen it a lot in the news. I was just joking. We went to an event at Milani Middle School, and my daughter now has a coconut rhinoceros beetle temporary tattoo that she got handed. But it's a big issue. Just my family's house, it has a coconut tree, and we've had many coconut rhinoceros beetle fall out. It's just so widespread now, and we're seeing it everywhere. And I think people are realizing now that our invasive species, if they've been underfunded for years. And even Mililani has had a real big problem with the little fire ant. And so that's, again, something that I think we've done a better job paying attention to this year, but we still have a long way to go.
I absolutely agree. It's definitely something that we have to think of since, Hawaii, I'm sure relies a lot of our products come from importing. And that's how a lot of the invasive species actually come in. So.
Yep. And we are very low on inspectors. There's things that we really need to work on. But also to everybody listening out there, what do you think is the best part of working at the legislature?
The best part of working at the legislature, I would have to say, is the amount of information that you get to learn. And it's so rewarding to come into work every day and actually work with individuals like yourself. And Rep Board, every single person that I come across with. And especially all these individuals that are experts in their field that are coming to testify. You're just learning so much about not just the world in general, but the state of Hawaii. I'm not from Hawaii. So it's been really nice to be able to get to know this beautiful land that I now call my home.
Yeah. And that's what I tell people. I go, it doesn't matter what industry you work in, what job you have, where you live. The things that we do here at the Capitol affects everybody. So understanding how it works, getting to learn about the process, all the information that's going through is really, really useful. And, I get it. I have a 4-year-old. I have a 6-year-old. We've entered the world of, baseball and soccer and jujitsu, and life gets busy. But it is so, so important for people to get involved and know how the process works and how to have their voices be heard.
I agree.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing with us. You have, again, so many deep insights because you've been here for multiple years. And thank you, Angela.
Thank you so much, Rep.
You're listening to Capitol Convos on AM 690 and FM 94.3, where we have conversations about the legislative process. Please come out this Friday, April 12th, to our legislative town hall. It's going to be at Mililani District Park from 6 to 8. Please join us so I can hear your feedback and have a wonderful conversation on the bills that are moving through the legislature. Now we have Kaylee, who's going to be talking with us. Kaylee, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us, how did you get involved?
Well,
Hi, everybody. I'm Kaylee. I have a very untraditional path of how I came to work in legislation and work in the Capitol in general. I was fortunate enough to just graduate from college. I graduated with an undergrad in biochemistry. I found myself kind of lost and like thinking about taking a gap year. I wasn't really sure like what I wanted to do next. And thinking about the big financial component of going back to school and like what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I actually stumbled upon Tom's posting on LinkedIn, and then I decided to just give it a shot because I've had experience in research. And then I was fortunate enough to get a session spot, and here I am now.
Yes, and that's what I always tell people. It doesn't matter what your background is. There's something at the Capitol that will apply to you, and there's always so much to learn. And what has been some of your takeaways from being at the Capitol?
Ooh, I've seen a little bit of everything, and I've got to learn about a lot of different topics. It's so wild to me. I've sat in the committees of tourism, consumer protection and commerce, as well as economic development.
And those are really, really important committees, as you know, we are talking about the cost of living and having enough jobs here in Hawaii. And so with this being your first year, what are some of the bills that have caught your attention?
I think one of the biggest ones that have caught my attention is HB 2192, talking about limited ownership of cemeteries.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
Yes.
Right? Not something that we would normally pick out as a big one. Tell me, why did this grab your attention?
I feel because it had a more personal and community feel. So this one was specifically focused on Sunset Memorial Park. And I had a lot of community members and family members and individuals really come and share their testimony, and just their personal feeling was really moving to me. And thinking about like my own family and like how they have their own plot and they just want to be laid to rest. And you know, it's hard to see your family share a crypt with a homeless individual, or it be vandalized or just really pillaged.
So what does this bill do?
So this bill would grant limited ownership to an individual or an entity looking to assume it, where they wouldn't own it per se. They would just fill in as like a caretaker. So they could put up fencing, security measures. They could call the police on like homeless people or people doing not so great things like selling drugs or, you know.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something about the emotional aspect, or people coming and sharing their heart. And that is so, so important, again, in the legislative process of going, how does this bill affect you? You know, how does it make a difference? Because as a legislator, that is what really makes a difference. And obviously it has to you as well, because it does stick out when people take the time, especially when they're community members, to come out and say, hey, I really need you to pass this bill. Or other times, I really need you to not pass this bill because it's going to hurt us for X, Y, and Z. Do you have any other bills that have stuck out to you this year?
I think the second one that really also made an impact with me and also originated out of CPC was HB 2686. It had to do with stabilizing the insurance market. We've seen a lot of issues and people coming to testify about condominium issues. So this would provide them property insurance in the event of another natural disaster. I think it's very unfortunate as we are reeling from the effects of the Maui wildfire and kind of trying to be proactive. I really appreciate this measure, as that has been a pretty big topic of this legislation season.
Yeah, I, in our office, have received many, many phone calls and people having issues where they're not able to sell their condo because they don't know if they're going to get that insurance coverage, or if something does happen, whether either even going to be able to have insurance. And so this has been, again, like you said, a very, very big issue and an important one for the legislature, and often one that people don't think of as a top of mind issue, but it really, really was. The amount of testimony that came in, the amount of emails that we had, this was a big issue for people. What were some of the things said in testimony that really stuck out to you?
I think it was just reflecting back, because the purpose of this bill and where it kind of originated from was talking about Hurricane Iniki and thinking about reinstating the Hurricane Relief Fund, which was a big thing. And it came to a shocker to me that it has been dissipated when it had millions of dollars in it. But it, of course, went to other causes. So I think really being there and taking the proactive measures and steps was really enlightening to me. And to just hear DCCA like share their comments and talk about looking at other states and all the natural disasters that they're reeling from, and kind of being prepared for the next step if the insurance market does decide to pull out of Hawaii.
Yeah. And so that's something that's really important. It's so funny you mentioned it goes back to Hurricane Iniki. I remember that was my first day of kindergarten when Hurricane Iniki. So that was a long time ago. But again, really, really important because it's bigger than just Hawaii, right? The insurance industry is reeling across the country, across the world. I mean, it's so much bigger, and it's an issue that we really have to get in front of. And so I'm glad that we are addressing it this year and watch this bill as it continues through the legislative process.
Yes, so far both the Senate and the House version have made it through. So we'll see which one prevails in the end.
Absolutely. And so for those people who don't know much about the processes, there often can be a House bill and a Senate bill, and they are called companion bills. As they move through, we are soon to head into the conference committee section of the legislature, where the House and the Senate come together for the very first time in the session to decide which version we're going to go with and which language we're going to put in. So that's kind of the end. I always tell people, it's kind of my metaphor. It's probably not a good one, but if you really wanted spaghetti and I really wanted chicken and we had to come together, sometimes spaghetti wins out, sometimes chicken does, or sometimes we end up having chicken parmesan and we get a little bit of both. And so that's what we're heading into with the conference committee session. And again, with these bills, you can follow them on capital.hawaii.gov. I mean, I don't know if you can tell people how helpful that website is.
I find it very helpful. I check it almost every day. I check it almost like it's social media. It's kind of a crazy thing for somebody of my age to talk about. You can just type in the bill number with either the HB or the SB into the search bar, and you can find up any year, current and past legislation. You can look up who your legislature is, as well as what committee they sit on. Something I found helpful going into the session and looking at all the bills that were going to come through my committee and kind of being able to read it and be proactive about that.
Yep. I mean, from everything, you can search keywords. Like if you really care about fishing, you can put in fishing and see all the bills that apply to that, or reports and lists. Going to the capital.hawaii.gov website really, really is helpful. And for those who don't know how to navigate the website, they can go to the public access room. They teach you how to use the website. And so I know as a research analyst, you're looking things up all the time. But again, it's something that's useful to the general public as well.
I agree. It kind of hints off of that Civil Beat article written, I believe it was by Danny D. Garcia, where he talks about how many people live and they're labeled as normies. And that's what I would consider myself before, as somebody just going through life, like doing all your expected milestones of education. And now I'm here and like in the forefront of it all.
Yes, you get to be in the weeds with the rest of us here.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining me and providing your insights.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes our episode of Capital Convos. I would really like to thank our guests today from the House Minority Research Office, Maya, Racine, Sophia, Kaylee, and Angela, really providing their insights because they do so much work when it comes to analyzing the bills that go through the legislative process. And as you're listening to this and you'd like to watch the video, please go to hawaiihousegop.com to be able to watch the video of today's episode. Again, you're listening to Capital Convos on AM 690 and 94.3 FM. We air every single Monday from 6 to 7 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we'll see you next week.